In this NCAA Football Road to Glory Challenge, I'll be recreating Deion Sanders' career. In the late 80s, Deion Sanders was an enigma in football, amassing over 186 tackles alongside 14 interceptions. In Deion's actual legacy, he proved from the start at Florida State that he would be something special. As a freshman, Sanders started in the Seminoles secondary. In his time at FSU, he was a two-time All-American cornerback. By the end of this challenge, I want to see if I can get more touchdowns, more interceptions, and more tackles than the real prime time. Who knows? I may need to transfer to make it happen. Now, let's see if we can outshine the prime. Our team as a whole wasn't predicted to do anything crazy this season. With our first matchup being against number 17 Pittsburgh, we were in for a challenge. I didn't start off too hot. I didn't really make too much of an impact defensively, as the QB pretty much avoided me the whole game. But our defense was able to get some turnovers, and when it really mattered on fourth down with just a few seconds remaining in the game, we were able to get the defensive stop, which gave us the 14-7 victory. In our second game, I actually had a lot of opportunities returning the ball, unfortunately never getting to the house, but getting good field position works too. As a defensive unit, we were playing well and had a pretty good lead. Halfway through the fourth quarter, I make a huge mistake and bite on the fake, giving the receiver enough room to catch the touchdown pass. While the game was close through and through, towards the end, I did something that even Deion Sanders didn't do in college, using my speed to run past the lineman to get a sack, completely shifting the momentum for us. And just like that, we pulled out the victory. I didn't have a crazy game, but I was definitely getting more comfortable. Halfway through the season, we were looking pretty good at 5-1, and while I wasn't putting up crazy stats, I was happy the team was doing well. Now for the final stretch of the season, we have a really tough go at it with a bunch of ranked opponents, but if we win out, we can definitely make the playoffs. And during that stretch of tough games, up first we had NC State, and we played pretty well. I actually ended up getting a really nice interception and bringing it back for a little bit. My return game was on point as well for a period of time. Most importantly, we got the win against them. In the following week, we had number 3 Miami visiting us, and it was a close game in the first half, but eventually they pulled away. We did everything we could, but it wasn't enough, and they ended up winning. The next couple weeks weren't too bad, but against Florida in the swamp, we came up against some problems. I played the best I could, but we weren't able to get the stops when necessary, and we weren't able to get the ball back, which led to the loss. What was nice though is we were able to make the ACC Conference Championship game in our first year, going back up against Miami. We played out of our minds. I was able to make plenty of stops, and we ended up upsetting number 2 Miami, ruining their playoff hopes, and becoming the ACC football champions. But our season wasn't over yet. We had to go up against number 14 Ohio State and CJ Stroud, and the game was close all the way through. In the beginning, the Buckeyes had plenty of opportunities. At first, we were able to stop them, but try again, they eventually got in. In the rain, I was a washing machine turning on the spin cycle. And in the fourth quarter, when we were playing well, we were able to get enough stops, but Ohio State was able to tie the game right as the time expired, putting us into overtime, where CJ Stroud ended up running in the ball to the end zone for the win. We ended up finishing our first year at 10-4. We made the all-conference team, and I won the Jet Award for Best Returner of the Year. Kansas State won the national championship, and going into my sophomore year, we had higher expectations, ranked at number 20. Going up against Oklahoma State in our first game, we really didn't have too many problems coming out with the victory, and from there we actually had a pretty decent schedule. But after a bad loss at Maryland, it seemed like our season was in a downward spiral. The following week we had to go to Miami, where we ended up losing in a very close matchup. The next week after that, we ended up beating Syracuse in a close game, but from there the rest of the schedule was just too difficult, losing our final 2 games before going up against Ball State in the bowl game, where we absolutely dominated them. Penn State won the national championship, and I had a very off season my sophomore year, stats-wise. So going into my junior season, I needed to prove a point. The coaching staff wasn't putting me back on punt returns, so I decided if I wasn't on the return team this year, I was probably going to transfer at the end of the season. In our junior season, we actually ended up dominating the majority of our first games. Texas State wasn't too bad, but we were able to put away the game before the end of the first half, whereas the Fighting Irish was a bit more of a challenge. We were able to make enough plays to turn the tide, giving us a large victory over the Fighting Irish. But then we had to go up against number 10 Ohio State, and they barely beat us. It was such a close game. A few weeks later, we had to go up against undefeated Miami, and while I was able to make a lot of good plays, we simply weren't able to get it done on the offensive end. Sitting at 7-2, and our final 3 games being all ranked within the top 10, if we won out, we had a great chance of making the playoffs. Up next was Wake Forest, and it was a close game, but they were able to pull off the victory to stay undefeated with a game-winning field goal. Unfortunately, we stumbled at the end of the season, not even making the conference championship game, and we ended up going against Utah in the Frosted Flakes Bowl, where we absolutely dominate the Utes 49-7. And from there, it was another disappointing season for the team, not making the playoffs. Despite my great play and winning the Jim Thorpe Award for Best Defensive Back, I had 8 interceptions my junior year, but it wasn't enough. So I decided to make a change. I was able to secure a huge NIL deal with Penn State, and so I was going to be a Nittany Lion. Despite an experienced offense and defense, we were being overlooked and a dark horse for the season, not even expected to do anything in the conference. So we had to go out there and prove all the doubters wrong. Going up against number 4 Clemson in Memorial Stadium, we had the opportunity to do just that. The team was playing well, and then I pulled off one of the biggest highlights of my career, pulling off a one-handed interception and returning it for a little bit, but we were able to outlast Clemson in double overtime, defeating Clabe Klubnik and the Clemson Tigers. After starting 5-0, we had number 14 Michigan at home, and in the first half, it was a defensive battle, both sides being held under 10 points, and the game stayed close all the way through. At the goal line, I was able to prevent a touchdown, which sparked the defense. Then, in the fourth quarter, I was able to return the ball all the way back up to the 35-yard line after breaking some tackles, putting us in field goal position, putting us up 28-19, but we were able to pull away with the victory 28-26. In the following week, we had our statement game going up against number 1 Ohio State. And to everybody's surprise, we jumped out on top fast. Our offense played great, and Ohio State's was a simple case of too little too late. And from there, nobody else stood a chance, and we went undefeated in the regular season. Matching up against Purdue in the conference championship game, it felt like a complete mismatch as we dismantled the Purdue defense, which secured the Nittany Lions' second conference championship in 3 years, along with our second playoff bid in 3 years as well. We were matched up against number 4 Oregon in the first round, and boy was it a tough matchup. Oregon's freshman phenom Bill Nipple was on fire, and while he was able to milk the defense, we were able to stay out on top throughout the game, with nice defense like this, securing the onside kick along with our victory. After a tough matchup, we were on our way to the championship game, winning against Oregon 33-27. So there we were, matched up against Arch Manning and undefeated Texas. It had all come down to this. Deion Sanders had helped lead undefeated Penn State to the championship game in Pasadena. And in the first quarter, Manning throws it off into the flat to Johnson, but I make a nice tackle. Throughout most of the game, we were able to stay on top of the offense and not let them get too much. And in impressive fashion, Arch Manning leads Texas all the way back to take the lead 30-29 with just a minute left in the game. But our offense was able to get into decent field position at the very end to kick the game-winning field goal, making us the national champions of college football. And with that, Bill O'Brien had won his second championship in 3 years, all while proving that Deion Sanders made the right choice switching to Penn State for his last season, where overall we had a pretty decent senior season, which led to Prime Time getting drafted by the Arizona Cardinals with the 5th pick in the following NFL draft. Overall, I have to say I feel like I did a pretty decent job recreating Deion's career in NCAA 23, but let me know how I did. Check the comparison, let me know if I did better or not. Want more NCAA football content? Then click on this video right here for my Road to Glory series.